I put a link in the description for you above to my Puppet Center post at Pre-K Pages. And in that post is a lot of what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Thanks, Roberta. I appreciate that. So if you're the kind of person who wants to go back and get that information, you can do whatever you want with that, pin it, whatever you would prefer to do. So here's the thing about puppets. And yes, I am just sitting here making my puppet talk because it's kind of like therapy putty for me. I love puppets. A puppet center in the classroom or having a puppet theater in your classroom can be a little challenging. So I want you to let me know in the comments below if you have a puppet theater or center or area for puppets in your classroom where the children can explore puppets on their own. So we've talked before with Jamie White from Play to Learn Preschool about using puppets at circle time. But what about having puppets in the classroom? So let me tell you a little story. Well, I have several stories, but I'll try to narrow it down about puppets. So one of the things that I've found coaching teachers over the years is that one of the first centers to go away is the puppet center because it can be really challenging to manage, right? Yes, Jenny says we have puppets that I take out as a center, not as an exploration on their own. Elizabeth says, I do, but my kids just throw them around. All right, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Elizabeth. So that's what all teachers, well, not all, but many teachers say that. That's what I've heard over the years. And it wasn't until I really started, I didn't realize that that's what other teachers, that's what they were experiencing or that's what they were feeling until I started coaching teachers and noticed that like puppet theaters were just gone and like there were no puppets in the classroom. And I was like, why not? So I started examining what it was that made the puppet center in my classroom successful. So here's the deal. Every time I put a puppet in the puppet center, so I don't just put out a bunch of animals, because if you put out a bunch of animals in the puppet center or the puppet area or whatever, what are they going to do? They're just going to go rah, 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 rah. And they're going to chase each other around and bite each other, right? That's because that's what makes sense to kids. Not all kids have a puppet at home. They don't really even know what puppets are or how they work. Most kids don't. So it's something that we really have to work with them on. So here's the thing. Puppets don't have to be a problem in the classroom. They can actually be a very useful tool for teaching a lot of skills, okay? And it can work. So here's what I do. I always put a book with the puppet. So I never put a puppet in my puppet area, whether you have those in your classroom library or you have them in a center, whatever. I always put a book that my kids are familiar with. Yeah. So in this case, it's Five Little Monkeys, right? So if that's a song or a finger play or whatever, a rhyme that your kids are familiar with, then you can put the puppet with the book. And now you've set an expectation. It's not just a it is something that they're familiar with. So I put the book for retelling. The kids, I know the kids can't read it, but if it's a familiar rhyme that they have done with me many times in circle time, it's one they know and they love and they feel confident, then I will put some puppets in the puppet theater. But here's another thing, right? Puppets are expensive. There is no question about it. Sometimes you can get them at the Dollar Tree, but they definitely don't last as long as the high quality ones. But I'll tell you a secret. Are you ready? He's going to tell me the secret. Yeah, I agree. You don't even need a puppet. I have used cutout pictures of monkeys on craft sticks because who has 5 puppets, right? And who really wants 5 kids and their puppet center, right? I just put out 5 cutout monkeys on a craft stick. And guess what? The kids still got all the benefits, right? The kids get the benefits. And so what are the benefits of puppets, right? In this case, with the Five Little Monkeys book, or any book that's going to go along with a puppet, whether that's a real puppet, if puppets can be real, or a popsicle stick, those benefits are going to be oral language development, right? Story sequencing, beginning, middle, and end. They're telling a story. What happens first? 5 little monkeys jumping on the bed. One fell off and bumped his head, and the kids always love to do that. Even if they have popsicle stick monkeys, they fall off and bump their head. Mama called the doctor and the doctor said, right? That's oral language development. That's retelling. Retelling is a standard or a guideline or whatever you want to call it, a learning objective in early childhood. Retelling a story is a very crucial part of the emergent literacy process. So when we put a book to support the retelling, it gives the kids the supportive structure that they need to be successful in the puppet center. So they've got their oral language skills, right? They've got interactions with the other kids in that center. I usually just put 2 in there, sometimes 3, and 1 person can be the audience because they usually need an audience. But if you get too many kids behind the puppet theater, then it usually will fall over because the force of 3 of them pushing against it, it just falls over. So I've always had a rule, 2 behind, 1 can be the audience if there's no other audience. I have one little person that's afraid of puppets. Yes, I can see how that would be. I can see that. I would do something special with that kid, show them there's nothing inside. I think I used to have that when I was little, but I certainly don't now. So we've talked before about the benefits of puppets in circle time, but this is for centers. So social emotional skills, puppets can always help us with emotions. Puppets can be sad. Puppets can be happy. Yay. Puppets can fight. Puppets can be used to model all kinds of things. So you will see kids acting out. So of course the book is there to support and give them a supportive structure. But once they start to understand that these puppets are storytelling devices, right? Then they will start telling stories from their own lives, just like they do in the Dramatic Play Center. So don't be surprised if your puppets start having babies. If they start acting out scenes from home, that's okay, because that's what puppets are for. They're for developing that oral language, that storytelling. When they're acting out scenes from home, they're practicing problem solving because, they're working through scenarios in their real lives. Of course, music, puppets go great with music. I've had some folks say that sometimes their kids don't participate. I find that if I notice any participation issues, if I get out a puppet, pretty much, and the puppet starts dancing and singing, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Oh, I don't have any toes, It gets kids going. Fine motor skills, when kids put their little hands in puppets. Now, this is something to be cautious about because a lot of puppets are made for our adult hands and not all puppets fit on little kid hands. And so that can be a frustration for them. So that's another reason I like to use the popsicle stick puppets, because they just need to hold them in their hand, right? But this puppet, what I'm finding with him is he's really wide. Like my hand is stretched all the way in here through his arms. I can't imagine a little child's hand being able to do that, right? So sometimes kids have problems manipulating the puppets because their hands are small. So you can either buy puppets that fit small hands, right? Or use the craft sticks. I find that it decreases frustration if they're like, I can't get the mouth to open and close. And sometimes I'll guide their hand in there and show them. And then they're like, well, if I open and close the mouth, then I can't use the arms. I'm like, yeah, I know. Puppets are tough, right? So putting them on a craft stick at that point it's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And all you need for that is a printer and some paper, some glue, some craft sticks, and you can have any puppet in the whole world that you want. Behavior. Puppets are great for teaching behavior, right? And so they can act out scenarios. They can be like the, good cop, bad cop. They can be like the bad cop. Oh, and let's see, Maurice is going to go, and this is Maurice here. I just named him that. Don't ask me what his name is tomorrow because it will be something different. But he's going to go into the Black Center and he's going to play. Let's see if Maurice knows the rules. And then Maurice goes in and he just makes a huge mess and the kids are like, no, Maurice. And I'm like, oh, what? What's that? You mean, I like the surprised look on his face every time I like, and then the kids can help him. Yes, modeling behaviors is perfect. Joanna says my kids use both hands to manipulate puppets. Yes, a lot of them do because they're not made for these little hands. Although I did have a set of puppets once that was made for little kid hands and they were awesome. They fit them really well. And then of course we talked about retelling. So some of the things I found as far as setup, you don't need to have a giant elaborate puppet theater. Okay, that's the first thing. I know that we all think that we have to have that. And I remember when I was in the classroom, it was that special year when I was blessed with 4 walls and 4 tables and a desk and a giant filing cabinet, and that was it. And all of my students, more than 20 of them. And I didn't have anything, and I really wanted that puppet theater that the teacher across the hall from me had. She had this deluxe, fabulous, gigantic puppet theater, and I so wanted that. And I didn't have it. But guess what? A couple years later, I was in a different classroom and I did, and I couldn't stand that thing. It took up so much space, and it really didn't need something that size to achieve the results I wanted, which was oral language development, literacy, retelling, social emotional. I didn't need a giant puppet theater, and that's when I started to downsize my puppet theater. I also didn't need a big giant puppet stand. I do find that when puppets are displayed upright, that kids are more likely to use them rather than being stuffed down into tubs or bins or whatever. So I tend to just have a couple of puppets at my puppet theater because I'm always going to have a book there, right? And it has to be a book they're familiar with. And as the year goes on, that repertoire of books and puppets they're familiar with gets larger. But in the beginning of the year, it's usually just like these 5 little monkeys on a stick in the book, and then over time I can add to that, but too many choices, then it gets out of control, right? Yes. And then the other thing, so you don't need a big giant puppet stand. I had one of those once and it was great. But I found that as I've been in many different classrooms over the years in many different scenarios. And I found that just having a puppet with the book in the beginning laid on top of the puppet theater or nearby or stuffed into a Ziploc and then hung on the wall next to whatever you have as far as your puppet theater goes, it works just as well. And kids are just as engaged and they experience the same results as if when you had a giant puppet holder and a giant puppet theater and all that. So yeah, you don't need a lot of fancy tools. And in some cases, I've had kids that liked to use the easel as the puppet theater, or they would go underneath the easel and put on puppet shows, because the easel's like a tent almost, and I was like, well, what do I need this giant puppet theater taking up half my classroom for if they're just going to go underneath the easel? So you don't need anything huge. I think the best puppet theater I ever saw was a cardboard box, honestly, because you can fold it up. Boxes, they collapse, right? Yeah, so you don't need it out every second. Now, your programmer director may disagree. That's something different. But I'm talking about for those of you in small spaces, don't feel like just because you don't have a large classroom that you can't have puppets, because you totally can. And again, those craft stick puppets, they don't take up much room. They go in a Ziploc bag with the book. You got your 5 little monkeys right there in a Ziploc bag, and then boom, that's all. It's flat. It stores flat, right? So there's no need for anything fancy. And then, of course, modeling. So as somebody earlier was saying, and I thought that was great, the kids like to throw the puppets around. They're not engaged in that center. They don't stay very long. Adding a book will really, really help increase the engagement. And of course, you have to model. We can't just put the book and the puppets there and say, have at it. We have to show them over and over and over again. So I would probably do it in large group. And yeah, the backs of their chairs, perfect for puppet theater. Nothing fancy, that's right. Benefits that they get out of using puppets are still all there. The puppet theater doesn't impact that. In some cases, the puppet theater is there just to appease whatever program you're in, their standards. So let's see, I lost my train of thought. Oh well. But anyway, the craft sticks, you don't need a lot of space. Honestly, you don't. And you can have fancy puppets or you can have craft sticks, but it doesn't matter. I used, and I should have got him out, a paper bag puppet for Pete the Cat. This was before Pete the Cat was a puppet. Okay, now you can get a Pete the Cat puppet, but at the time we didn't have one. And my kids were so into Pete the Cat. I was into Pete the Cat. So I made one from a paper bag. They loved it. They loved it. They ate it up. They thought he was real. He would whisper in my ear just like this puppet does. All the benefits of the puppet were still there, but it was a paper bag, and I put a little blue face on him, yeah, and all that good stuff, but all the benefits. No fancy puppets are necessary, no fancy puppet theater. What you do want are the oral language benefits, the social emotional benefits, the retelling benefits. So yeah. Hey Jen, I'm on tonight. Tom's not here because the Red Sox are playing. So yeah, on Red Sox nights, Tom is off if they're in the playoffs. I just found this out. So yeah, lots of benefits for puppets in the classroom. So I really encourage those of you who either don't have puppets out for kids to explore or don't have a puppet area, and that you can easily go in your classroom library. If you don't have a large classroom, or you don't have a puppet theater, or you don't want to add another center, it doesn't need its own center. It can go right into your classroom library. And so I just have a little area with a couple of these Ziploc bags that the kids know. This is where the puppet books are, because they're in Ziploc bags in the classroom library, and they can get them out and use them. And so as long as you model what to do. And I would usually do that modeling during large group, because we're going to sing Five Little Monkeys anyway, right? I mean, who doesn't sing Five Little Monkeys? We're going to do that anyway. So when I'm doing that, I'm using the puppet, I'm using the book, and then at the end of that little rhyme, I'll go, oh, and you know what? When I'm introducing this for the first time, if you liked that, who likes that rhyme? Who likes Five Little Monkeys? Show me your thumb if you like the Five Little Monkeys. Oh my goodness. So many of you, I love the monkeys too. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this book and the puppet over in, and then you take it over there and show them and say, it's going to be right here. And then when you go to that center, you can get out the whatever you're using, and then you can do it too. Who wants to show me? And then you can invite a couple of them up, and they can demonstrate how it's going to work. And then you can also demonstrate, what we're not supposed to do with the puppets. And so my kids knew this little mantra called puppets don't bite and fight, puppets play. And so that was a little mantra that I taught them. So whenever they saw someone fighting at the puppet center, because sometimes when they're acting out those scenarios in the puppet center, that fighting will happen. And if we put out animals, this is what I always say, if we put animals out in our puppet center, and then we're surprised when kids bite with them and fight with them, we can't be surprised, right? Because that's what animals do in reality. Animals in the wild, because we usually put out like monkeys and zebras and like these wild jungle animals. That's what animals do. They're actually doing or enacting what they know that animals do. So we can't blame them for that. So we have to show them our expectations. And so Five Little Monkeys is just an example I used. I have some frog puppets too. And then of course, craft stick with a picture of a frog. It doesn't have to be fancy. Those little foam cutouts. So if you're like, I can't even handle drawing a frog or a monkey or anything like that, or you don't know how to get the clip art, those little foam pieces they have at like the Michael's and places like that, your craft store, gluing those on a craft stick is just great. They always have pumpkins right around this time of the year in October, and gluing 5 of those onto craft sticks along with the book, 5 Little Pumpkins, perfect for your puppet center. Those little pumpkins on a stick, and they talk in the rhyme, right? There you go. Boom. Puppet center done. Check that off your list.